All right. Welcome, everyone. Appreciate everyone that's joining live. I know we've got a really good list of folks that are going to be joining, and we'll probably be also listening to the recordings. So to be respectful of everybody's time, we want to go ahead and get started. My name is Brian Garut, and I'm with Float. And I've got Cameron here as well from Cloud Service. And so just to kind of set the table, I know there's a lot of folks on here that probably either know Float or Cloud Service, but maybe don't know both. So, Cam, I wanted to start with a very quick round of introductions, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Cameron Kennedy, Senior Director of Partnerships here at Cloud Service. So, yeah, we're super excited to be hosting this series. I think that we'll be able to give a lot of value on these topics that everybody's looking at these days of how to be the most efficient in the cloud and make sure that your costs are under control on an ongoing basis. So yeah, as Cloud Service, we focus day in and day out on Microsoft 365 and Azure consulting and licensing. So do a ton of work in the modern workspace, data and AI, infrastructure, and all of that. And then we partner with Float and do a lot of work and lean on them for ongoing cost management, really just efficiency and making sure that you feel comfortable scaling in the cloud, making sure that you have all of the efficiencies in place and everything that we'll be covering over these 3 sessions that is extremely valuable and comforting as you scale in the cloud, making sure that you know that your costs are going to stay under control.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Yeah, Cloud Service is a really great partner for Float, and hopefully vice versa. But we work really well together. So anything Microsoft in the Microsoft stack, Cloud Service is a great partner, top 1% Microsoft partner, and so we partner really well together. And Float, like Cam said, we're all about cloud efficiency. Cloud efficiency. So we've tailored this webinar series to providing some, I guess, background and education on some of the native tools that we feel like are often overlooked by folks on cloud teams that can really set a strong foundation for driving cloud efficiency and automating cloud efficiency and governance. So, as you can see here, the main goals of these webinars are to enable you and your cloud teams to gain better visibility into usage costs and optimization capabilities, to establish some of the governance and guardrails that are available as, again, free tools within the Azure portal, and really to empower your teams to work really efficiently. So I guess probably a good segue into this slide, which is really what is cloud efficiency? Well, ultimately, cloud efficiency is kind of a moving target in every organization, but like the way we define it is it's the highest aligning the highest possible business value with the lowest necessary cost, risk, and operational effort. And it's really not just about saving money because a lot of things require are trade-offs. So it's very business specific, and it is as also something that is kind of a relative target that you're always moving towards. So we've developed this matrix to help visualize this, where you kind of have this maximum efficiency area up in the top right quadrant, and this is showing you how we measure that. So we want to drive the highest possible performance, reliability, security, and operational excellence at the lowest possible cost, operational effort, and risk for the business. And the challenge here is that it's never static. So there are forces that are always pulling you down and to the left in cloud environments. These forces can be new capabilities that are released within Azure, which happens often. It could be waste as new resources are created, or or things are changing within the environments. It could also be that the business requirements change, right? And so all of these things are kind of forces that are constantly pulling you down and to the left. And so the way that we look at this is the truth is that the work never really stops to kind of move up and to the right and then to stay up and to the right. And so that's really the reason that we wanted to put together this webinar series so that we could give some real practical capabilities and highlight some of the real world use cases. Azure Policy is something that is very broad. There's really kind of unlimited capabilities in terms of auditing and enforcing governance throughout your Azure environments. And so we're going to spend some time talking about that today. I've got Chris Cavazzuto from who's a senior cloud architect who's going to walk through some of those capabilities. But some of the common use cases are, enforcing security and compliance standards, automating cost controls and waste prevention, and then on down the list. So really just want to make sure that we provide enough time because there's a lot to tackle here in this webinar for Chris to be able to really demo some of those real world use cases from the Azure portal. That's what we wanted this webinar to be, not a sales pitch, not a bunch of slides. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Chris.
Thank you, Brian. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right. Let me share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Other thing I need is my notes. All right, perfect. So here I am on my demo subscription. This is a pay-as-you-go subscription, which is currently incurring costs. Just to set up, what are we talking about here? Once we get our subscription to the cloud, we get a lot of freedom, and that freedom can be costly. If I go here and I'm going to create a resource group, my demo RG, I'm going to create it on ECUS, and I'm going to go ahead and deploy this. I am able to create and deploy resources within seconds. Right now, I just deploy a resource group, which I call a demo. And wasn't the right one, demo. There we go. And here I can go ahead and create anything. And keep in mind, these actually have my personal credit card tiled behind it. This is just for demos. So if I come here, I'm deploying a virtual machine. I can name this virtual machine anything. I can accidentally deploy this virtual machine on Australia. Nothing is preventing me. There's no warnings. There's nothing. So if I'm deploying an entire system, and this is from real case scenarios, I can deploy my front end on East US and then accidentally deploy my database on South Central US. And nobody will find out until they don't see the bill. Another risk to that is the sizes, of course. So this machine is telling me costs $102 a month, but nothing is stopping me from, what is the most expensive thing I can deploy here? Not the most expensive one, but nothing is stopping me from deploying this machine that costs $1,200 a month. And I won't find out my mistake until charges start occurring and I realize maybe days or weeks later, or whenever I receive the bill, that I may have deployed a machine that cost me $13,000 a month. So how do we prevent that from happening? How do we take control of our infrastructure and our Azure environment and reduce the amount of risk but still allowing developers to do what they do best and drive value to the business? This is where we have policies. If I discard all this, which was going to be a costly mistake, and I go to my subscription, I can go under settings to have policies. And for policies, I have two options. I can deploy Azure policies, or I can assign initiatives. Initiative is nothing more than a collection or a set of policies. In this case, let's just go to a policy. And there's really good documentation. I will be adding this to the chat so everybody can come here. It's really easy to find through Google. but Azure already presents us with hundreds of built-in policies. I talked about a couple scenarios. One of them was the locations where I want to deploy. As an enterprise or a new software development team, one of the things that we do is we select our primary region. My customers are closest to Central US, so I'm going to be deploying on South Central US. The next step to that is, so if a disaster happened on South Central US, I want my DR region. So you predefine that maybe my DR region is going to be East US. So you on paper have defined those things, but Azure doesn't prevent you to deploy anywhere else, like India. This is where the policy comes into place. If I come here and I click on that button, it would automatically take me to the Azure portal to see the policy definition. And the beauty about policies is that nothing else than a document that define how these behave. Brian, is this zooming enough for everybody? Like, can you see it well?
I think so. Some people may have to zoom. You may be able to zoom in to get a little bit better view if it's too small for you within the Teams window. But I think if you do that, it should be good, Chris.
So we have our definition, this label, we have properties, and this is basic metadata that allows whoever is using this through the front end to get an idea of what it's doing. We have the display name, we have the policy type, in this case it's built in, which is provided by Microsoft. We have the mode. There's two modes. We have index and all. Index are resources such as virtual machines, resources that are tagged to a location and can be tagged. So certain things like the firewall rules, they cannot be tagged. If I say index, I'm not covering those through the policy. So this is really important because if I'm creating a policy to add tags and I accidentally mark like all, then I'm going to be trying to add tags to something that cannot have tags. We have the description. Again, this is designed to help somebody or even your support teams as they are looking at the policy or getting denied on a service, they cannot deploy this, to the reason why they cannot deploy this. Then we have here the version and the category. This helps you organize your policies. For parameters, for this policy, allow locations, this is a really generic policy. So I need to be able to specify or pass to the policy which locations are the ones that I want to allow. So this is how we do it. We allow a list of parameters, and then the rest of the structure here is just making it easy for the user to understand what is this variable for, what is this parameters for. On line 22, we have rules. And the rules goes back to your CS classes. It's pretty logic in terms of what is it doing. So if all of the conditions or this list are true, then I'm going to deny. And my conditions will be on line 26, we have fields. I'm looking at the location. If the location is not in that list, that means that this is true. And my location is not equal to global because we don't want to deny the deployment of global resources such as Active Directory, global load balancers. We want to ensure that we allow those. And also the field type, the type of the resource is not equal to that business to consumers Active Directory. Otherwise, it will break up the services. So if all those conditions are true, deny. So if I say, yes, I want to implement this, how do I do it? If you are through the UI, you assign the policy, and that is taking that built-in policy and putting it somewhere or applying it somewhere on your subscription or environment, in the case you're using management groups. So I go ahead and select. I can go down all the way to a resource group. Exclusion is, hey, I have my entire subscription, I want to block that, but for data governance purposes, I have a copy of my database currently running on East Germany, or actually the Germany region or West US. I want that to not be part of my policy, but I want to create an exception. So with this, we can set up exclusions. Here is the policy that I defined, the policy that I found through the portal. What I can all the built-in policies will show up here for me, including custom policies that I have created. So if I click on that, you see here a list of policies, and I can choose any of these policies. I can search for them. So we're going to stay with the allow locations. We're going to choose the version. I know the only version on this one will be version 1. Select. And then I can give it a name, just any other name that may be useful for the user. Go to next. And here is where it's asking me, hey, what regions, what locations do you want to allow on your list? Ideally, if you're doing this, chances are you already have things on your system. Somebody already made those decisions for you. So how do we find out what regions is our system currently using, our deployment currently using? So one little trick that I like to use is I open a new tab and I go to something called the Azure Resource Graph Explorer. And this gives me a window to be able to query the resource graph. The resource graph is that metadata that describes the resources that I have on my system. So in this case, I'm going to go for resource. And then I'm going to do, actually, I don't even need a where. I have my entire system here. Summarize. And I want to look by location. I want to see how many resources I have for each of the locations I have on my list. So I run this query, and it's telling me you have East US, you have 8 resources deployed there, and you have South Central US, 22 resources. So I know this is my primary, and this is my DR. At least on the setup that I already have for this environment, right? You may have more regions. You may actually find out that you need to move resources from one region to another one because they were deploying correctly. Once that has been completed, then I can go back to the policy assignment and I say East US and South Central. If you see here, one thing to watch out is there are other regions that do not follow the normal convention names. Some people do have access to those. If you have access, you know why you have access to those. But instead of choosing, for example, South Central US STG, you need to make sure that you're choosing the one that matches the name of your query.
Real quick, Chris, I was going to jump in because you're actually showing a little bit of the capabilities around Graph Explorer to gain better visibility into your resources within the cloud subscriptions. And so that's a good teaser for the next webinar that we're going to be hosting. We're actually going to do a little bit deeper dive specifically on Azure Graph Explorer. And so now you can kind of see how these work together.
Thank you, Brian. So I'm going to go ahead and go to remediations. What the remediation means is there are different policies. Let's say I create a policy that says, if I deploy a storage account, I want to make sure that that storage account have tracing logs enabled for writing any transaction that happened to the storage account, and it's going to a service bus. So what I can do is I can set up on my policy to say, if somebody deployed the storage account without that link, add the link for them. And this will require a managed identity for the permissions, and it allows for the auto resolve. Go next. If you are not compliant, here I can then display a message for you. Let's say primary region. This will make it easy for the user to identify the mistake and being able to correct it. If I go next, then I can get to review this. I'll go ahead and create. So the policy I just created. Keep in mind, changes to policy do take a couple minutes. The creation of the policy can take up to 5 minutes to reflect, and it can take a couple hours to be able to evaluate your system, depending how long it is, how big it is. And the same thing with deletion. If I take a policy that already was taking effect and I delete it, it could take up to 30 minutes for the entire system to recognize that policy doesn't exist anymore. We don't have to enforce that anymore. If I go back to policies. As this load, perfect. We have my allow locations is deployed. It has not started. That's why my compliance is still showing at 100%. Once it runs through the system, then we will be able to get an actual number on the compliance state. Let's go ahead and test this. If I go to resource group, I have my demo that I created earlier. Go ahead to create something. I'm going to create a storage account. Storage account. Hopefully nobody have that name. Oh, it's lowercase, lowercase, come on. There we go. And then I'm going to deploy this on Chile. Depending on how long I have wait for this, I will may have a message here. It doesn't work across the board with all policies. I know the region restriction does. So since I just deployed the policy, it may still not scanning correctly. I'm going to go ahead and click next. Next. I'm not restricting anything else here. So now it's going to go ahead and evaluate if I can do this, and it's giving me an error. And if I click on that validation error, it's saying that this storage account that I just tried to create is disallowed by policy. The reason is because primary region, and that's the message that I post. So from here, I can click there, and it will take me to the actual policy. And this then allows, if I had the right permissions, I could create an exception to actually allow my resource to go through. Or then I can reach out and say, oh, yeah, my mistake. I wasn't supposed to deploy there. Let me actually fix that. Let me go to basic. And instead of Chile, I'm going to go to South Central. Oops. Like here. And then I'll go ahead and hit my review. Scanning again. Now no errors, so I can go ahead and create this. What ends up happening is the control plane, it's that infrastructure and that metadata you have on Azure. The policy behave right before something gets sent to that, it validates, and it doesn't allow anything to go pass through and gets into that deployment state. So if I'm running through the UI and it's not allowing, if I were to run a CLI command to deploy the same thing, it will block the same. If I were to have ARM code or Terraform code, infrastructure as code, to violate that policy, it will still deny it. It will throw that error and it will let somebody, the logs know this deployment cannot go through because it's violating a security policy. So
Chris,
going back, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to jump in real quick to zoom out about what we just saw. So we just implemented a policy that would be enforcing some sort of organizational standards of what we allow and don't allow. And so ultimately, what we're doing is we're putting those guardrails in place to where we're trying to remove the barriers of everything going through one central bottleneck of who can control what and how they control it, and really open things up for engineers to be able to do what they need to do, but they stay within the guardrails of the organizational standards. And so this can be preventing obviously cost mistakes or unintentional deployments. It could also be preventing in some cases something malicious. So this is kind of one of the roles that Azure Policy can take in establishing those guardrails so that the engineers can deploy resources that they need to, but they don't have to go through like all kinds of checks and balances. They get those checks and balances through this automated governance.
Thank you, Brian. So looking at the policies, I just show how to do this with regions. And how to restrict locations, which is one of the primary things we gotta protect ourselves on the cloud through the all unintended consequences that this can create. In today's landscape, one of the biggest concerns to the business is, hey, my environment is primarily virtual machines. And those machine learning workloads are extremely expensive. So I would like to protect myself and not allow anybody to use ChatGPT or to have machine learning workloads running on my environment, because they're not only really expensive, but my business don't really need any of that. It's not using it at the moment. We have a different subscription where we are experimenting with those things. We don't want that on our production subscription. So if I were to look at, sorry, I'm on exclusions. If I were to look at policies, right? As soon as this load, I can start to search out to see if there's anything that can help me restrict by types. And it will usually be on the policy name. So if I type here, I search, I have a bunch of results, but here allow resource type. And if I come to add this one, what this would allow me to do, then through my parameters, is to specify which types I am allowing on my system. The reason why I'm selecting this one is because I want to show a word of caution. As you are creating these guardrails for your systems, it is important for you first to set them up originally on audit mode, which is instead of deny, the variable will be audit. And that would allow me to try out what my system or if I'm compliant, and if any of my engineers need any additional resources. Because let's say that I say, hey, I just want to allow virtual machines. First of all, there's a bunch of virtual machines here, but if I find the right one, compute virtual machines, and I set up the policy with this one, one of the first things that I may encounter is that virtual machine, in order for a virtual machine to work, is not just that resource. They need a series of supporting resources such as the disk, the network, the VNet, extensions. So if I'm not really prepared for this, I may choose, hey, I just want virtual machines. And then now nobody can deploy any virtual machines because they also need those other supported resources. With certain resources, Microsoft is smart enough to know what you meant and then allow those other sub-resources. But keep in mind that as a word of caution, as you are doing this, make sure that you do your experiment first, and then you run your experiments on audit mode. If I go back to that policy that we had earlier, looking at a little bit of more advanced scenario, allow locations. Let's say that I'm really not trying to block all regions and then just give you an allow list. Let's say that I'm more worried about, I don't want you to deploy on specific data centers, let's say Europe, for compliance reasons. I can do that, but Microsoft doesn't offer me a policy to do that. So what I can do instead is I can take that policy, go back to the Azure policies, build, takes me to.
And we will provide a list of links here as a follow-up with the recordings as well, so that you don't necessarily have to go hunting for this stuff yourself. You can kind of go through your own self-education through some of the documentation we can provide as well.
Going to the general one. I'm going to initial this. Allow locations. I open it back up directly into the policy definition, because one cool thing that I can do here is Microsoft policy. It has pretty much everything that I need. It's already checking for the location. It's already checking for all the right things. I just don't want to allow a list of locations instead of not allowing them. So I can duplicate this definition. and this needs to be saved. So in this case, I'm going to save it on my subscription. And I'm using an existing category instead of creating one. I'm going to rename this to deny locations. I'm really not going to go through and change the description. So here I can say if policy rule, if all of these are true, then deny. And instead of not, I'm going to change this to in list of deny. And then I'm going to go ahead and change my parameter to say list of deny. This list location that can be specified to. I'm going to go ahead and remove this. That doesn't make sense. And then I can save this. So now I have created my own built-in policy. I go to the resource. I go to policies, assign policy, policy definition, deny. I have my deny location, which in this case, didn't highlight that. Go back. And you can see all of them says built-in, but mine says custom. Means that I am the only one that have this policy. It's not a policy that I can give to a friend on another company, or will have to copy the template. But it's not. It wasn't created by Microsoft. If I go ahead and click next, I have my parameters. In this case, I'm gonna deny East US, West US 3, Central. Next. And then review and create. So now I have my list of allow locations alongside with my list of deny locations, which whatever fits your scenario best. This is just an example on how I can take a built-in policy, I can copy it, modify it to better fit my scenarios, and then use it.
And Chris, I think that's a powerful, I guess, statement is that, first of all, you have hundreds of built-in policies that you can use and you can choose from that are kind of off the shelf. But then, Azure Policy is really so powerful that you can create very specific policies that are really specific to your business and your needs and your resources. So if there's not one that fits off the shelf, you can always create one, or obviously we're in this day in and day out. And so we would love to help you if that's something of need as well.
So now we have, this is all great, right? We can add policies, we can create our own custom policies, we can modify them, update them. If I am going to work on a policy, not all of them are the same, not all of them have simple configurations. So one of them that I really love is the allow, let's make sure that I spell this correctly. There we go. No, wait, this is the wrong thing. There we go. Oh, no. Allow virtual machine size queue. It's always a problem trying to find this one. So we talked earlier about the scenario of me being able to deploy a machine that is too big and then messing up with my budget. So with this one, I can ensure that only the sizes that are appropriate to the industry I'm working on and the size of my company are allowed. I can go ahead and click next. And this is where one of my problems start, because look at this list. It's huge. And then I gotta go mark one of these one by one and make sure that I have them right and make sure that they match my query. Again, another KQL query, I can go by types. So this is really cool if I'm just doing 1 or 2 policies and they're simple and it's just a set it up and forget it. But if I want to take this to the enterprise level, there are two ways that I want to abstract from here. One, I don't want to use the UI. I want to use either CLI to make sure that it's reusable, or I want to use infrastructure as code. If I'm using the CLI, there's the Azure CLI, which will be my recommendation for you to install. There's also the resource manager that you can install that PowerShell library. My example is going to be with the CLI. There's 2 ways that I can run this. I can go ahead and load up CMD or PowerShell, or I can use the console from within Azure Shell itself. And if I were to use that, let me load up Visual Studio Code. And if I were to use that, I'm going to copy a definition of the policy that allows me to do the virtual machine size queue. And on this definition, you can see that I have, let me copy that to code so it's easier to read. Give me a new file. So on this definition, you can see the command is AZ policy assign create. It's creating that policy assignment. And then the same way as my variables, whenever I was doing it through the UI, I'm giving it a name, a display name. I'm selecting that policy ID, which if you were to Google this, it will quickly take me to multiple places that are referencing all the same. So this is that same SKU that I was looking at. It's just the ID that it's on the Microsoft Gallery. That's how the CLI needs it. Back, I have then my parameters, and this is where it becomes a little bit complicated, right? Because I may have hundreds of machines. So I can put this on a JSON file and then referencing that file to have multiple policies using the same, or I can put it as an inline command. And then my scope. In this case, all that I've been doing so far, I have been assigning those at the subscription level. If I take this, no, I don't want to take this that way, because it has spaces. If I go ahead and run this here, and of course it's going to give me trouble because no, it's there. Let's go over here. Yep. There we go. So now it just run through and it deployed that policy. The problem here is I'm doing embedded JSON and the PowerShell prompt didn't like that, but the bash didn't have any problems with it. So going back, now I'm going to go to policies and I can see whenever it loads, now that policy will show here. And this is now a reusable command that I can deploy into multiple subscriptions, and my IT team can just reuse it, can have a file. It's loading the file instead of having to go through the clunky UI.
So, Chris, in the interest of time, I just want to make sure that we can touch on a couple quick topics. One is we've spent a lot of time on policies. We haven't touched on initiatives, the built-in initiatives yet. So I'd like to at least touch on that at a high level. I also understand that we've gone really technical in this demo, and so there's maybe some context that was missing up front. In the interest of time, we actually did have a previous webinar from March where we kind of walked through at a high level some of the capabilities of Azure Policy, and as we'll talk about in the subsequent webinars, Graph Explorer, and then some of the new Azure Advisor workbooks. If you haven't seen that webinar, I would suggest going back and getting it. Feel free to chat us or email if you need the link. But that way we can kind of, again, take this from, okay, well, how does this matter to me and my organization, and what does it enable me to do? And then this webinar and then the one next week and the following week are going to be a little bit more of the actual hands-on technical demos like Chris is providing here.
Thank you, Brian. So now we see that my allow policy enforce allow VM SKUs is already here. It's only allowing 3 sizes, which is that B2MS. They're all really cheap sizes. Now my environment feels secure because I know somebody's not going to deploy an M64 or the 412 one. That said, the real way that as you grow on your maturity level, the real way that you want your infrastructure to run is with infrastructure as code. I have chosen Terraform because it's the most common language when it comes to finding developers. So if you're trying to hire somebody to work with this, it's really easy to put somebody on a resume with it. Then have Terraform on the resume. So the policy looks really simple. Azure RM subscription policy assignment. I'm giving it a name. If I have followed the same protocol over, we leave the name, the display name, the subscription, which I have put in a variable called scope, and that policy definition, same ID that we saw before. And then here I can give it the list of the virtual machines that I have. I added a 2 to the name just so we can see side by side that I really added a different policy. And I'm going to run my Terraform apply. Keep in mind, behind the scenes, I already installed Terraform. I already installed the CLI. I already run my AC login command. And I'll be more than happy to provide documentation on how to do that. But this is more about how to do policies than Terraform. It tells me that it's going to do a policy assignment. It's doing what I asked him to do. It's adding those sizes. I say yes. And I say yeah, not yes. Okay. Come on. Do your thing. Yes. Deploy that. It may take a second. I don't know why through the Terraform, it takes a lot longer than it takes through the CLI. But it's creating the resources. In this case, it actually waits until it's fully creating and just not waiting for the confirmation. So while that runs, what this allows me to do is like I want to set up 100 policies. I can put them all through code. I can source control this, so I can source control and have pull requests for my policy definitions. And then I can have CI/CD integrations to create the guardrails for my systems. Whenever we actually engage with customers, we already have templates with hundreds of policies. It's just a matter of choosing them, moving them back and forward, depending on the needs of the customer. So while this runs, I'll come back to that later. We did want to cover initiatives. And initiatives are really cool because everything that we have seen so far, it's policies that I need to think if I need this or not. Does this place a good scenario for my business? How configuring this, choosing the sizes, choosing the right policies. But Microsoft have initiatives, and I can create my own initiatives. But in this case, I want to see what Microsoft offers. And most industries are tied to regulatory compliance. Microsoft offer initiatives to handle those scenarios. If I come here, you see CIS Azure Foundation 2.1. I have FedRAMP, actually. If you're trying to become FedRAMP compliant, both FedRAMP High and FedRAMP Moderate are here. The two of them have over 206 controls. They apply across the board. They're pretty much the same one on both. What FedRAMP High is composed of around 700 controls. Most of them are documentation in place, proper disaster recovery plan. What Microsoft cares here, and although it contains all the controls, what they really care is what they can evaluate automatically, which is, hey, my storage accounts are not exposed to the public internet, or I'm using private link connections, or I have an anti-malware installed into all my VMs. All those controls are already predefined for you. Whenever I'm engaging with a customer, my recommendation is to do one of the benchmarks, either the CIS benchmark, the Azure Foundation benchmark, or the security benchmark. In this case, the Microsoft Cloud Security benchmark. end up being one of the gold standards for security. I'm going to go ahead and select this one. We're running on version 57. And I'll go to the next. Wait, no parameters, no remediation. I don't want to go through that. My compliance measures, go ahead and create. And this is by default getting set up on audit mode. So it's not going to really block anything. It's just going to tell me a status on how my system is. Come on, refresh. It takes a couple hours for this to scan, so it's not going to be appropriate for the demo. But what I want to show you is all the control that this is evaluating as soon as it loads. Come on.
So while it's loading, I'll just note a few of the others that are pretty common. I mean, you have HIPAA, high trust, you have ISO, you have SOC 2, you have PCI, in addition to like the CIS benchmark, just like Chris mentioned. So there's a whole bunch of these pre-built, built-in initiatives that you can enable on your subscriptions. And like Chris said, it goes into audit mode. So it'll tell you specifically what resources are out of compliance. So it's really helpful in understanding and benchmarking where you're at versus these compliance initiatives.
So as we onboard to the cloud, right, there's a lot of these settings that we may not understand, like Azure functions, TLS versions, the TLS version of a storage account, the storage account being exposed to the internet, an application gateway not having a firewall. And there's a lot to learn. So what this does is it gives you a view that allows you to see where's your posture when it comes to security, and then allows you to have a target. For me, I treat this as action items. As I onboard any other system, then I work my way down the list by criticality, and it allows us to see, like, these are the things that we need to remediate, and how do we remediate them? Let me try to pick up an easy one. Storage accounts should have private links. So storage accounts by default are exposed to the internet. There's a bunch of policies for storage accounts into these policies. This one is checking the private link is enabled and that it is connected to the network to ensure that you have private connectivity. So if I view the assignment. Where is it? I messed it. Come on, go back. So here it will give me, once it's scanned, it will give me the list of the resources that have failed to that specific validation or this specific policy. If I go back to the policy compliance, let me load up and then I'll store policy. And keep in mind, these that I'm looking at here are just individual policies, the way that we were deploying them earlier. The main difference here is that this is an aggregation, a set of hundreds of them that make my environment more secure and compliant. So for example, on the selection of storage account, we have the account. Storage account should use custom managed key for encryption. That's an infrastructure encryption setting. Storage account should have, what is this? Azure Resource Manager resources. Secure transfer to storage account should be enabled. And this is a bunch of different settings and different configurations. Let me see if I can open from here. View assignment. Edit assignment, view compliance, view initiative. No, I will have to look it up and that's going to take a while. So from this, you can export individual policies to modify them. You can create your own initiative, but this gives you a benchmark that you need to be able to elevate your system. Brian, back to you.
Awesome. Well, there's so much that we try to pack into these to make it worthwhile. I know, again, we dove in pretty technical, and I understand there's going to be a wide range of people that are viewing this and will view it in the future. So the main idea is that there's a lot of powerful tools that people just really only scratch the surface of. And so we want to make sure that we are continuing to educate cloud teams on what those capabilities are and how they are impactful. Because really, as you start to take all of these things and build them into your cloud operations, it really starts to streamline the capabilities of your team, the operational abilities of your team, and create more efficiency, like we talked about. And so, again, I think we'll probably have to have a follow-up and maybe a deeper dive even further into Azure Policy. But really, our hope is that we were able to highlight some of those capabilities today, so that it could start to get you thinking about where there may be opportunities to apply that. Now, to wrap us up here, I just want to circle back and let you know that you don't have to go this alone. That's why cloud service exists. That's why Float exists. Again, we're in this day in and day out. We've done this in small Azure environments all the way up into large, complex enterprise environments. And really, again, the goal is how do we increase all of the operational and kind of the well-architected framework, performance, reliability, security, operational excellence, and then how do we reduce the costs and operational effort? And so we really take the approach of meeting everybody where they're at, every individual customer where they're at, and putting together a plan and strategy, and then helping to hold the teams accountable to building that efficiency and maturity level in the cloud, so that as you continue to grow and as you continue to expand workloads, you're already doing it within this foundation, on top of this foundation that you've created. So if you want to get a hold of us, you're wondering how to get a hold of us, there's a couple of email addresses here. We can run training, we can run assessments, we can do advisory and support. And so there's a host of different ways that we can get involved and help you. Last thing, we want to make sure that we're providing value. So any feedback that we can get in real time or after this webinar is posted, would love to hear from you. We've got another live webinar on June 19th, a week from today, same time. And then one the following Thursday as well on June 26th. The topics are going to be Azure Graph Explorer, which is really kind of, we started with governance here. Azure Graph Explorer is diving into visibility and how you can build powerful queries to see what resources, and not just resources, but all across your resources, you can kind of dig in to get summarized info, and that'll help you in a number of different ways. And then with Azure Advisor Workbooks, sounds pretty straightforward, but there's some new capabilities that we think are really powerful, and making sure that you can monitor for when Azure service retirements are coming up, for example. Azure, as they're bringing in new stuff, they're retiring old stuff, and that can actually create operational risks for you, as well as cost risks, because all of those costs can be changing as they're trying to cycle in and out new capabilities. Last thing, the recordings and the documentation will be provided. So again, if you missed part of this or all of this, we're going to provide recordings and follow-up documentation for each of these individual webinars. And I guess to close it out, we look forward to hopefully keeping the dialogue open with everyone and seeing you on the next webinars. Cam, do you have anything to close this out?
Nope, really appreciate the presentation today. I think it's highly valuable. I'm looking forward to the next two. So yeah, be sure to sign up for the next two webinars for the next two Thursdays, and look forward to seeing you then.
Thanks, everyone.